We're here at Earth X, and we're going to talk with Hap Klopp, the founder of the North Face. Well, that's a brand that many of us know. Hap, let me ask you first. Why did you start that company all that time ago? Because it is a little bit a time ago.
The true story
Yes,
is
I
I couldn't work for anybody else. I had horrible interviews after I left the Stanford MBA program because I'd run a family company when I was in college. My father had died, and so I was flying back and forth and decided to sell that company. And so leaving the MBA program, I sort of thought I should be running a company. And when you interview with a large company like Procter & Gamble, which was one of those, they don't necessarily agree. And so after a couple of those interviews, it was obvious to me that I had idiosyncratic ideas, and I had developed a philosophy about environmentalism and women should be paid the same as men.
What an idea.
Yeah, and all these things, but that wasn't the game. So,
No.
So if you can't work for anybody else, you've got to start a company. And the only thing I really knew a lot about, because of what I did in my youth, was go to the outdoors. And the idea of protecting the environment, the idea of paying women the same as men, hiring people from whatever, it didn't matter what their sexual orientation was, didn't matter, if they could speak the language well. We spoke 14 languages or dialects at all time. To me, that was going to be a perfect environment. So, so I decided, why don't we do that around something? And I could go use the products. I'd be around people I liked. They were kind of all my friends that were in the business. So it's something, I had a mission behind it. I wanted to change the world, but I wanted to change it through what I had observed, which was the idea that if you took people deep into the wilderness, they were going back energized and a changed person. And they'd have a commitment to preserving the earth. They would also not want to put things into the landfill. And that would be how you could have a modest impact on a few people that hopefully it'd have a broader impact on the world. But even if it didn't impact the whole world, it was kind of a fun thing to do.
It's a beautiful way you describe that. But so actually, you could argue that it is still the most important contribution one can make, because connecting with the land and with the environment, that's the beginning of sustainability, more so than any other kind of, legislation or so.
Well, I totally agree, and I think, it's an iconic brand now. There's no doubt about it. Not only because it's $4 billion in sales turnover, and I'm no longer involved. The VF Corporation owns it, but one of the reasons it's iconic is because it's touching on something that is meaningful to everybody. It's not just generating another widget that people, because it's tough to get really into loving widgets, but loving the earth, loving the outdoors, sport activity, I mean, that's a pretty easy thing. So when the brand is sort of integrally interwoven, or sort of inextricably interwoven with that, you really have a chance to build a brand that sticks.
Yes, yes. To build what is now a $4 billion company, and the way it started with, if I may say that, a few hippies,
yes.
How do you get from what was then such a small-scale operation to that major global brand that it is today?
Well, a lot of smoke and mirrors as you go along, and lots of trial and error, to be very honest. Not every product works out and whatever, but some of it was about building a brand that was not a product. We built a logo and we put a tagline in, but that's not what a brand is about. A brand is what you stand for, and you have to repeat it and repeat it. But we build it around our qualitative values. We build it around disruption, about quality, and about triple bottom line business, equal commitment to the planet, to profits, and to people. And building all of that was a way that you didn't have a ring fence around a small company. If we'd said we're a sleeping bag company, we probably would never have been very large. Maybe it could have been 50 million, but nothing like billions. But when you start talking about encompassing a philosophy, and that expanded into that was something that didn't really have limits. And of course, when you make a product like North Face makes, it's global. Not every product that you can make, physical product, is a global product, but that relatively easily could scale. And once we decided to do that, we had to learn a lot along the way. I never sold a product in my life. I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know exactly who you should hire to be able to do it. But we got some people, and then as we went along, we started getting more. When I initially started, we had 14 people. None of those people that I hired had any business experience. I hired them for their passion for two things. The first one was to change the world, which we wanted to do. The second one was obviously around the outdoors. I believed with the background I had, I could train them in business. From school, my MBA at Stanford, running a company, I could teach them that, but you can never teach people passion. So once we got those people there, now to give you some idea, 11 of those people ultimately went on to run major outdoor companies. One started Mountain Hardware, another one ran Patagonia's international operation, another one ran Birkenstock, another one started a women's athletic line called Title IX, Missy Park. And I would attribute in part to learning that, all of us learning together, growing together so that they had those skills.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Actually, it reminds me of my own start of my own career, where I, as a law student working into a newsroom, somebody saw in me that he said, "Well, this guy can think. He can't write, but we can teach him to write, but we can't teach him to think."
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a little bit the same thing.
Yeah.
The passion, the thinking, that is something people should have. But with all that experience. You know, we're now looking at these big environmental challenges in the world, and one of the bigger challenges is that, particularly in the United States, that whole conversation has become completely polarized. Whereas, you know, a certain word, say climate change or two words, global warming, it puts off half of the people just because these are the words, and therefore the conversation stops, and therefore all these good efforts for a cleaner world, a better world, you know, get obstructed because of the wrong language, perhaps, or the wrong kind of conversation. From your experience, how would you do that? How would you change that conversation into such a way that that's more productive and healthy?
Well, first of all, it's very frustrating. It's frustrating to me that good things that need to be done are suborned by political divide around words as opposed to the concepts of what you're trying to do. My approach, and what we tried to do at North Face, and I continue to do, is I consult with companies and advise companies, whatever, is one, try to stay away from emotionally laden words. Try to stay away from negative. Try and stay away from dogmatically telling people how to live their lives. Because you get pushback from that and you don't get people listening to you. So if you can find something that is inspirational, aspirational, that you can put around your company, and for example, if you talk about climate change, as you said, the political divide, it's bad words, I could say that's ridiculous, but the fact that I say it's ridiculous doesn't change anything because it is what it is. Yeah. But the reality is, if you start talking about the need for clean water or clean air, you know, I grew up in the Northwest of the United States. Every summer it was blue skies and whatever, all the time. Now, almost without fault or without difference, there's a month of the year when the skies are covered with smoke because of wildfires. Okay, I can either talk about, well, there's wildfires and that's caused by climate change or whatever, or you can talk about, how do we get back to those clean skies that really inspired us? And I think if you can make your company, your brand, your message around things, clean water, everybody appreciates that, or around that, without getting into the emotion-laden words, you have a better chance.
So you teach at universities. What do you learn there? Well, what is that new generation telling you?
Look, it's great, and I mentioned to you when we were talking before the show, I was mentioning the fact that young people have a different perspective, one that I embrace. They care more about the planet, particularly when you look at Gen Z or Alpha. These are people who have to live on this planet, and they realize the change, whether it's plastics in the ocean, whether it's smoke in the air, whether it's, you know, it's not enough water, you know, being fished out. These people care. So I get real feedback from people who care. So when I send these ideas out to them, they respond in a not only a positive way, but frankly a naive way sometimes. Yeah, we're going to change it, you know, and I'm going to say, you know, I tried changing the world. The reason I'm here teaching you is I didn't seem to get it done. But So it's refreshing. It's refreshing because they're looking at some of those issues and they're looking at them. Most of the younger people aren't as involved in the political divide that you talk about over some of these words. They're more about, how are we going to live on this planet? What is it going to be? They don't want to go to Mars for anything other than exploration of science. They don't want to see that as a place that they want to live. And they see that the direction we're going could possibly force that as the only landing spot. So I try to teach how to think about things, but I don't try to teach what to think. If the greatest thing you can do when you're teaching, I believe, is to be able to inspire people to try and learn and to expose them to ideas, not necessarily teaching them to be like myself, but teaching them to think so that maybe everything I'm doing is wrong, and if they thought that, but they thought it through, that's okay.
Yeah.
And so you get that. And the environment and sustainability are a fairly big word with the younger people now. You see lots of projects in business, you see them developing environmentally focused businesses where when I went out of school, that nobody did. I was one of the early ones, and everybody thought I was a granola lover, a tree hugger, one of those people who was a dirt bagger, because you couldn't possibly be responsible and leave the Stanford Business School, and now you're going to do what?
I say you're a lucky man, and I say that because I sense in you the inspiration that is still feeding you. You are an inspired man. You know why you're getting up, what you're getting up for. So, but where does that inspiration come from? What inspires you? What is it that keeps you alive?
Well, the same thing that inspired me when I started inspires me today, and that is a need to improve the world, a need to change the world. People today probably don't recognize, but back in the '68 when I founded the company, there was chaos in the United States. Martin Luther King had been killed, Bobby Kennedy had been killed, there was a Black Panther movement, there was the SLA, there was fighting in the governments, there was Kent State, on and on and on. There were a lot of problems, and it seemed to me that wasn't going in the right direction. It seemed to me that in wilderness is the preservation of the earth. Thoreau said that. I experienced that. I thought if I could get them out there, they would come back being better stewards of the earth, but have a very positive mindset. Well, as I look around today, and not just today, but it's continued over the years, we have a similar mindset. So I have a sense of urgency, a drive to be able to change that, because I think an individual not only can, but has a responsibility to do that. So when I wake up in the morning and say, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get people to think about it? And going back to the point you're talking about, how do I get them off of this political divide over words that are absolutely so distant from what the problems and solutions are? Mm-hmm. And so, so a belief that I can probably inspires me. Even though when I look at what I've done, it's pretty modest, but I've had some impact, but I still believe that an individual can impact the entire world with their philosophy, and not because you can do it all, but you can inspire, and it's that ripple effect. And then the people you inspire others, and the networking grows and grows and grows.
One of my heroines was Anita Roddick, and she said once, well, if you think that one person can change the world, I'll ask you, have you ever slept in a room with one mosquito? Do you align with that thinking?
Yes, I totally would. And she did a great job with the Body Shop.
Well, she surely did, but of course was also a change maker as you are. Yes. So, what is on your list? What's to be done?
Well, again, as I said, I want to change the world, and so I'm working with a number of disruptive companies.
Yes.
I'm assisting. Besides, I teach at major university, University of California, Holt University. I do a podcast. I've written 2 books, one about success called Conquering the North Face, one about failure called Almost, and you learn more from the failure than you learn success. But the 2 companies that are top of mind that I'm integrally involved with, one is out of Santiago, Chile, and it's a company that is called Spora Biotech. And what we're doing there is we're taking mycelium, which is a root structure of mushrooms, And we're converting it into products that can be made into food or pharma. But the focus of the company is actually to make a replacement for leather, because leather is environmentally very damaging. It takes 3 years for cattle to grow to a size to be harvested. They have huge amount of lands, like in the Amazon, have to cut everything down so they land, and then they're putting methane in the air from farting and belching and whatever. When you finally harvest the hide, there's imperfections, so about 30% is just waste and goes in the landfill, and then you use chromium to tan it. And it's just horribly, the waters around the places that do it are blue. So
terrible.
This product that they're doing will grow in 10 days. You go in and you go into the Amazon, because they go expeditions, Amazon or Patagonia, and they have a reason to protect the indigenous cultures because now there's an economic reason for them to stay. But all they take out, they don't cut anything, they just take out a culture. They take the culture back to the lab, and different species, and hundreds of thousands of them, different species will give you a different end product. Then you make sheets of this material in 10 days, and now you have a replacement for leather. And
grow your own shoe.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were going to Mars, or if we want to live on the moon, you're actually going to have to grow your clothes.
Yes.
People think about the food. What am I going to do there? But you've got to grow your clothes too, and you could do that. And so it's a whole technology, and they're also using even CRISPR technology. So not only are there hundreds of thousands of species of mycelium, but you can make it into an infinite number. As I said, you can make pharma, you could make food, you can make textiles. They're working on leather because a company has to start and only do one. So anyway, that's one. And then I'm working on a democratized healthcare, which is genetic testing and IV drip therapy, because the cost of healthcare is not sustainable. In the United States, it's 17.9% of GDP. In Europe, it's roughly 9.9%. But neither one of them is giving us the outcome that we want.
No.
One way to change that is by actually introducing healthcare early, which is if you know what foods you eat or can eat, you can actually change your health outcome. Genetics will determine it overall, but you can do those things, as opposed to spending lots of money trying to bring you back when in fact you're late in the game.
Is that an American company?
No, it's a company based out of Dubai and Manchester.
I see.
And so it's very interesting. So they're both disruptive companies. I mean, the textile one ties to my North Face background, of course, and I can make introductions that are pretty meaningful to them in terms of people they can collaborate with, because they're basically an ingredient brand, albeit like a Gore-Tex or whatever. And they've talked about making their own product, but the reality is it's a big ask just to make a biotech product in Chile to get it to the rest of the world.
Yeah. I want to go back in closing to your mission to change the world and to introduce people to the environment, because that's where the lessons are and the connection to the planet is. So you're teaching to younger generations. So what is the main lesson you want to leave those people when you get them in your classes with? What is that?
Well, the key lesson, the overarching lesson, is you can.
2 words.
Yeah. Most schools teach you what you can't do. They tell you what you can't do. You can't do this, or you can't do it at this time, or whatever. Or society, your parents say, well, and the reality is we all have a tremendous capacity that if we tap it, we're going to be that person that changes the world. Now, change the world could be a variety of things. It could be a painter, it could be an artist, could be a business person, it could be whatever, but most people get that stripped away. So I try to embolden them to, one, think, two, to act. There's a quote which I frequently tell in my class, but the quote is from Goethe, the German philosopher, which is, whatever you can do or believe you can, begin it. Because boldness has genius and power and magic in it. And it's so true. So if I can just embolden them to do that and not fear failure. Failure is just a learning process.
I say to you, Hap Klopp,
Thank you, Jurriaan.
You do.